Hey, Jordan Belfort here, and it is Whiteboard Wednesday. And the topic for today is a really awesome one. It's actually the basis for the entire straight line system. So the title is called the straight line syntax. And just so you know, I never really teach this publicly like this here, but I thought it'd be good to just do an overlay, like just, one big, big picture view of what the syntax of the straight line is. Originally, I was going to do body language today, but I decided to put that off to next week because I just had this sort of, this last second idea that if I could give people a big picture overview of how the straight line works, that it would just give them massive value because, I'm giving so much content right now with my daily motivations and my weekend intensives, right? So I think this would be a good thing for everyone to see, give them a good idea how the straight line works. So here's the deal, ready? There's an overarching concept that really guides the straight line. It also was what really inspired me to create the straight line. And that concept is that every sale is the same. And when you first hear that every sale is the same, it kind of defies logic. It defies sort of, intuition in the sense of why would every sale be the same? Every sale is different. People have different needs, different values, different beliefs, different pain points. They come in with different experiences, right? So how could every sale be the same? And when I first said that, it was about, I think it was 1988. It was a Tuesday evening. And I had my 12 brokers. I said, guys, don't you get it? Every sale's the same. And they're like, what? Every sale's not the same. I'm like, guys, every sale's the same. Watch. It's a straight line, and I drew the straight line on the board, and that was how I invented this system that became to be so well known and revered around the world. It's made so many people into millionaires, right? And let me explain this. Listen, there's so many reasons why every sale is the same, and it's why I'm able to always close at the highest level, and it's why I've been able to take people who really don't have any natural sales ability and turn them into world-class closers. It's because I show them this sort of shift in perspective for all communication, whether it's selling, negotiating, just interpersonal communications between, people of the opposite sex or same sex, whether, in any situation of influence. And I call that goal-oriented communication. So in those cases versus random conversation, every sale is the same to someone like me, who's a natural-born closer, and every other natural-born closer. We have this, it's a God-given gift on nature, whichever you believe, right? But what happens is my brain is ordered in such a way where it all makes sense to me, and from literally the moment I step into any situation of influence, it's like, oh, it's almost over before it starts because my brain instantly orders it along this line I have in my own mind. So what I was doing, I have to sort of open, a close, and these different steps along the way, and I'm able to make every sale the same. And that's what every great closer does. So whether they know it or not, they're using the straight line system. In other words, what the straight line really is, it's essentially the step-by-step principle that allows people to be world-class closers. Everyone who's a world-class closer, natural-born closer, they're using the straight line whether they know it or not. All the straight line system does is it actually takes what all great salespeople do and turns it into a very simple and easily learned strategy. And that's the key, because when you have a strategy, you can transplant it in someone or transfer it to someone else, right? And bam, they have massive results. So there's many reasons why every sale is the same. I'm going to give you one of them right now, the overarching reasons, which is called your straight line syntax. And syntax is simply a fancy word for order. So syntax is and we learned this back when I was in college, it's a scientific term. I was a biochem major, right? The syntax is the order in which you go about doing something. So when it comes to sales and persuasion, when we talk about the syntax, it's the order in which you go about creating certainty. In other words, what you're doing when you sell, when you persuade, is you're essentially taking someone from a relatively low level of certainty and making them incredibly certain. So you're essentially transferring your certainty to that person. The way we do that with the straight line system is through a series of defined steps. And we execute those steps in the same order or same syntax every time. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand you the straight line syntax as a big picture overview of how the straight line works. So watch, let me just take this paper off here, start fresh. Here's the way it goes. Step one of the straight line syntax is that you must take immediate control of the sale. In other words, what we do with the straight line, I can't get into the hows yet. I've done that in other lessons and in my other stuff, but I'm just giving you the big picture overview. But you must take immediate control of the conversation, of the encounter. This is true of sales, persuasion, negotiation, and we show you how to do that with the straight line. But the point is once you take control, and just to give you a big picture, it's by being perceived as an expert and sharp and on the ball. And in those situations, people will essentially hand you control because you're an expert. In the presence of an expert, we tend to cede control of something, right? We say, okay, they're the expert, let them guide us. That's what we do. We've been conditioned since we're yaping to do that, right? So that's step one. You must take immediate control in the first few seconds of the encounter. And the reason that's so important is because that allows you then to execute step two in the syntax, is to gather massive intelligence. You gather intelligence, and the way you do that is by asking smart questions. In other words, if you were not in control, you would be unable to ask questions. You get it? You'd be interrupted. They'd be asking you questions in a different order. In other words, there are certain things you need to know when you are trying to close. You know what their pain points are, their needs, their values. Are they financially qualified? Unless you can ask them questions, you're screwed. You can't close anybody. And this is one of the biggest mistakes people make when they use the straight line, is when I say take immediate control, it's not so you can talk. It's so you can start asking questions in a certain order, in a specific way, and you can find out everything you need to know to see whether or not A, the person is qualified, and B, give you the tools you need to close the sale. Now, when you ask those questions, however, you must ask them in a very certain way, using certain tonalities and body language, so that when they respond to you, both while you ask them and when they respond to you, you end up simultaneously building massive rapport. The secret to rapport building with the straight line is it happens simultaneously with gathering intelligence. In other words, you ask questions in one way and they're like, oh, fuck, this guy's like the Grand Inquisitor. Only so many nosy questions. Or you can ask them in another way where you come off as the family friend, the trusted advisor, the physician who's trying to cure them. That's what an expert does. He asks smart questions because he needs to have certain information to see whether or not he can help you. And if so, which essentially solution applies to you. You have to ask questions, right? So with a straight line, these first three steps, they always happen in this order. If you don't do this first, you can't do these two. And if you don't execute this in the right way, using the right tonalities and body language, then you will be out of rapport and viewed as the Grand Inquisitor, and you have no shot of closing. So that's your first three steps. Your fourth step of the straight line is you need to have a transition. In other words, when you are done asking all the questions you want to ask, the ones you have to ask, and you know everything you need to know, you're now in ultra-tight rapport because you've asked your questions using the right tonalities, the right body language, and you've listened intently, so they're like, wow, this person really cares about me. They're listening to me, they understand me, they get me, which is the basis of all rapport. You've now put yourself in perfect pole position to now close the sale. So you have this transition, which is as simple as, Jill, Jim, John, Joe, based on what you said to me, this is a perfect fit for you. Let me tell you why. Based on, I asked you questions, and based on how you responded, here's the solution. And your solution is represented in step 5, which is you make your straight line presentation. You make your presentation. And your presentation consists of essentially why, all the features and benefits, most importantly, of your product or service, and why it's going to solve the problems you've uncovered during your intelligence gathering phase. And there are certain rules that we use for the straight line to make our presentation to make sure we do it in a certain way, in a certain format. We focus on certain first things first, right? Can't get into it right now, not enough time. But the point is, notice that we always have executed our steps in the same way. We don't just make a presentation without first taking control, gathering intelligence, you see? So the steps, the order is crucial. It's like when you bake a cake. If I was to give you sugar, flour, water, vanilla extract, 2 eggs, butter, flour, right? And said, go ahead, bake the fucking cake. You need 1 cup of this. You'd say, how the fuck do I bake a cake? What do I do first? What comes second? Well, if you put the butter in before the eggs, you're screwed. Same thing with the straight line in any strategy. It's not enough to know the steps. You must know the syntax or the order of the steps. That leads me to step 6. At the end, we always ask for the order for the first time. In other words, at the end of the presentation, you ask for the order. And there are certain rules for that as well. But again, notice how it's always going to be the same. You're always going to ask for the order for the first time at the end of your presentation after you've done these things, okay? So let me rip this page now. Everyone take a quick look. Okay, now we go to step number 7, which is where we're going to get hit with our first objection, right? You ask for the order for the first time. What can they say? They can say, yeah, let's do it, which is the perfect lay down sale, no objections. Doesn't happen that often. They say, nah, I don't want it. That's very rare too, because remember, you've already been through your intelligence gathering, so you've probably weeded those no's out already. Well, you certainly should have different training, right, that I do. And then most of the times, though, you'll get the maybes. And maybe is all the common objections. Let me think about it. Let me call you back. Bad time of year, right? And for those, we engage in a process called deflection. In other words, the first objection, we never deal with it head on, because all objections are smoke screens for uncertainty, meaning someone is not certain about something. So rather than saying, I don't like your product, I'm not sure about you, they'll say, oh, it sounds good. Let me think about it. So rather than doing that, we engage in a process called deflection, where we say, I hear what you're saying, but let me ask you a question. Does the idea make sense to you? Do you like the idea? In other words, we took an objection and we said, wait, I hear what you're saying. We're in rapport, but let me just ask you this. Do you like the product? Do you like the idea? Does it make sense? Do you see what I see? That's the first step. Then from there, we run our first looping pattern, as it's called. And the reason we call it a loop is because, remember, we're working with a straight line, right? So if this is your open, this is your close, right? You ask for the, these are your first 4 seconds right here. You ask for the order here. You made your presentation here. So when you ask for the order and they say, let me think about it, you're here, you now actually have to loop backwards into the sale and re-present. In other words, when you gave your initial presentation here, they're still not certain enough. We have to raise their level of certainty. The way we do that is through these looping patterns. So that's step 8. And at the end of our looping pattern, okay, we're going to ask for the order for the second time. So a loop always ends with you asking for the order, right? Then we want to step number 9, which is going to be where we lower their action threshold. In other words, for the people, remember when you ask for the order, let me write this better. I have terrible handwriting. Threshold, okay? So remember, when you ask for the order the second time, they could say, yeah, let's do it. They could say, no, I want to get off the call, or I'm leaving your office, right? Or they could just give you another objection. They'll hop to a new objection, which is very common. In that case, we're going to run another looping pattern here. Again, I can't get into that right now. But before we ask for the order again, we are now going to engage in a process called lowering their action threshold. And what that means is that every human being, there's a fly, okay? Every human being has a certain preset level of certainty that they need to be at in order to be comfortable enough to say yes. In other words, me, I'm a sucker. I'm an easy buyer. I love to buy shit, right? You don't have to get me so absolutely certain to get me to buy. If I'm pretty certain, I'll buy. So that's called having a low action threshold. Then you have people like my father, who's so hard to sell to, toughest nut to crack for a salesman. Before my father buys, he has to be absolutely certain, damn sure of it, right? He has a high action threshold. Well, what happens as you move someone down the straight line, you'll notice sometimes that you have someone that is very, very certain, and you can tell because they sound certain, they're acting certain, they're like saying, oh yeah, I love your product, oh, you're a great person. They give you all the signals, but they still won't buy. Right? The reason is because they have a very high action threshold. The beauty, and by the way, the secret sauce to the straight line, the back half, this back half when you're overcoming objections and closing, right? The secret sauce is learning how to lower the action threshold. And with the straight line system, we have a very powerful, one of the probably most powerful inventions I made with the straight line is learning how to lower someone's action threshold using a very simple 7-word language pattern that starts the pattern, okay? Once we lower the action threshold, we ask for the order again. Then comes step number 10, which is if they still haven't bought, we're gonna now lower their pain threshold. Pain threshold means that when we, remember our earlier steps, they're right here, right? Number 2, we gathered intelligence, right? Well, guess what? One of those things that we gathered was where does their pain lie? At the end of the day, that's the secret to closing the tougher sales. When you know what someone's pain is, you can then amplify that pain, and what it does is it actually makes them lower their own action threshold. When someone's in pain, they act no matter what. That's the difference. So we wait and we hold that pain in harness. We don't solve it too quickly, but if they still haven't bought, then we actually raise up their pain threshold, and bam, that's when in these early steps, everyone who's gonna buy is pretty much gonna buy. Now, there are additional 2 steps here. You can run more loops. In other words, if they still haven't bought, you can do the product again one more time. I'm falling over, right? Okay, you can do one more time. But the last point I wanna make here is creating customers for life. And what is that? Well, here's the deal. This is very important. A very different set of rules applies once you've closed the deal. That's how do you take a customer that's a one-time, first-time customer and make them into a raving fan who buys from you again and again and again, gives you massive referrals? That's the key. It costs us so much money and takes so much time to get one customer that when you get them, you don't want to lose them. So we have all these different rules and principles and strategies that we teach you with the straight line that essentially maximize your ability to take every person who comes into was in your funnel, now is your client, and turn them into a long-term client who buys again and again and again and refers their friends. So altogether, we have those 12 steps. That's your straight line syntax. And again, now on this weekend, I'm going to have my Saturday morning training. It's going to be an awesome one. I'm going to be talking about body language. And by the way, if you don't know anything about this or you really haven't taught this at the highest level, I'm telling you, body language is literally a game-changing principle. In other words, when you're in front of someone, how close you stand to them, how you sit in your chair, how you make eye contact, how you shake hands, what you wear, how much facial hair you have, how much jewelry, whether you narrow your eyes or open wide, whether you lean forward in your chair with emotion or back with logic. There are so many rules, and these are powerful, and they really cut to the heart of 2 things. Number 1, getting into rapport with someone, and number 2, transferring certainty, which is the secret to closing sales. So again, that training, by the way, and you're going to be getting, guess what? This is the first time ever, and I'm done with it after this. I'm giving a free trial. So you can, this is a paid training. I do on Saturday mornings. I don't do webinars where it's bullshit and it's like, oh, come attend my free fucking webinar and I'll waste your time for 2 hours teaching you fucking nothing and I'll sell you some shit at the end and try to make a lot of, that's not what, this is my best training, 1 hour of corporate style training where you learn a specific skill on a deep dive level. In other words, I go into one skill deep. This weekend, I do it every weekend, it's going to be on body language. And I said I want to do these. I'm going to have millions of people on these things, right? And it's a paid training. I'm charging, ready for this? $1.99. $1.99. Seriously, I wanted to price these things at a level where I could have millions of people all over the world. So part of it's because I was so incensed with these free webinars, wasting my time. I said, there's got to be a better way. I'm going to do paid trainings. When people want to learn something, they know they have a resource they can go to where it's only about learning. You never get sold to, and you learn the best content out there. So that's Saturday morning. I hope you enjoyed this video. Share it with your friends. This is a really important big picture overview, and it really gives you the context from which you can begin the journey of being able to close anyone who's closable, negotiate like a pro, share your vision for the future with your employees, your staff, your children, your spouse, your significant other. Seriously, the ability to communicate your message is everything in life. This is the beginning of your journey. I love you all, and hopefully I'll see every one of you on Saturday morning. Take care.